Could you please take the roll?
Yeah. Yes. Commissioner Curran?
Here.
Commissioner Harper?
Here.
Commissioner Miletus?
Here.
Commissioner Palcic?
Here.
Chairman Rosenbaum?
Here. It's my distinct pleasure to introduce to the audience our newest commissioner, who was just appointed yesterday after a very tough hearing, Commissioner Palcic. And Commissioner will not have the opportunity to vote today solely because the paperwork isn't in there.
That's right.
But welcome.
Thank you.
We are very, very pleased to have you, and we're looking forward to working closely with you.
Likewise.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let's see. I guess we have retail, no, it's a presentation with Greg Astley of the Oregon Restaurant and Lodging Association. Good morning.
Morning.
I'm glad we're doing this. We've made this a quarterly event, right?
Yes, sir.
I guess I made it a quarterly event.
Good morning, Chair Rosenbaum, Commissioners. My name is Greg Astley, Director of Government Affairs for the Oregon Restaurant and Lodging Association. We're located at 8565 Southwest Salish Lane in Wilsonville. Thank you for the opportunity to come to you this morning. I do want to manage your expectations, though. It does say presentation. I'm not sure that I really have that for you, but I would just like to mention a few things and answer any questions that you may have. So. First, I'd like to just recognize the great ongoing relationship we have with OLCC, and in particular, the director and his deputy. We've been meeting with them on a regular basis to address some of the issues that come up, and it's been extremely helpful. It's improved our communication, and in fact, we have explored the opportunities in the future to feature OLCC in our magazine that goes out quarterly. As well as have the director and his deputy on our podcast to talk about some of the issues that the industry faces. So we do appreciate those opportunities, and as well the opportunity to come before you and talk about what's going on in the industry. To that end, there is one issue that I'd like to bring to your attention, something we haven't discussed much yet, but we have a growing segment of marijuana tourism, and we've had a couple of our members talk about what that means for the industry. And currently, if you're an OLCC licensee, you're not able to get a special event permit for a marijuana event. So we'd like to see if there are some options available that we can explore to see if we can allow that to happen. So we do have some folks that have been asking about it, both in Portland and Hood River and a few other areas as well. So,
will you expand on that a little bit?
Sure. So, for example, if you're a hotel and you have a restaurant and a bar where you're serving alcohol, you're a licensee of the OLCC, you're not able to get a permit to hold a special event where you can feature marijuana. You can't do the two things at once, and so you'd have to give up your license with the OLCC to hold the event on premises if you wanted to do that. So, and I see Commissioner Miletus over here nodding. So
yeah, no, it's a big one, and I'm glad Orla's got their attention as well.
Yeah, we've had a couple of members bring it to our attention that they would like to do that. It's a growing segment of the tourism industry.
Would they like to do it in the confines of the bar or in a separate area?
Just in a separate area of the hotel. It's not something that they would want to do in the bar, but you'd have patrons in the bar, obviously, and then you'd have patrons at the event itself. So.
And if you had an event that was separate from the bar, would they be allowed liquor at it?
It would not be intended to be liquor at the marijuana event. The marijuana event would be a completely separate event. We'd just like to discuss how we could identify those folks so that they'd be able to do both things at one time. So, but no, there wouldn't be a crossover between products.
If I could expand for a second, Chair.
Yeah,
I mean, I think it's great having Orla aware of this issue, because an interesting thing is, cannabis is legalized, but consumption is still in a gray area. And frankly, if it's ever going to be allowed in public, it's going to take, an act of the legislature. It's going to take us giving it some thoughtful rulemaking and really working in tandem with our partners in the industry to figure out how it works best. And Orla representing essentially bars, restaurants, hotels, really the third places that aren't home or office that where this would be likely to be consumed. I think it's an ongoing conversation, but I think having Orla being thoughtful in how it gets looked at is absolutely key, especially, I mean, on the lodging side as well, where, you know, you've got smoking rooms and, which is one of the few places tourists could consume the products. And it's just it's a challenging problem, because there's certain legislative things that need to happen. There's certain things that we may be able to do, which might be good to talk with staff on. But to concur with what Greg said, I think it is worth looking at how we kind of are able to be more thoughtful and looking at social consumption and sampling. And I'd be happy to take it up as a cause if you'd like.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Steve, you got anything to say about it?
Well, this is an issue that's come up, and a lot of these facilities where we have an alcohol license, they're a hotel, we've defined the entirety of the hotel as the alcohol premise. So that presents some problems when we're trying, even with the earlier trade events that we first put in place. So not just on the consumption level, we've had to work in how you conduct trade shows, what his effect would be on the liquor license. So this is going to be ongoing, but I think we're going to have to look at how we balance that as there is more demand and more opportunities for legal events to happen within hotels. But our objective has been at the commission always to keep alcohol and the marijuana separate. There have also been some conflicts in some of the establishments I think we had in southern Oregon between sort of full-time residences at a resort area and those that were coming in not residents and using facilities, and I'm not even sure which way the conflict went, but it was between the folks that wanted to consume marijuana and those that were residents there. So it's going to be ongoing. We don't have all the solutions because we don't have all the legal social consumption laws. Legislature failed to act on any of that in this session, but it's going to be something that we're going to have to continue to deal with as we sort of segment out how we make more finite, I think, our alcohol licensing, and then provide the opportunities as the demand's there. So we'll continue to work on it as staff on behalf of the commission.
But if somebody had a VFW hall, I'm just using that as an example, in the middle of nowhere, and they decided they wanted to have a marijuana festival, they couldn't do that now, could they?
No, not with a liquor license, no.
Right. So we got a long ways to go. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yeah, just would like to start the conversation. So, yeah. With that, I'll answer any other questions that you might have. I appreciate the opportunity to be before you today, though.
Well, I'm just curious, are you seeing some of these hotels wanting access or the ability to designate marijuana rooms? I mean, smoke rooms? Has that been a conversation?
It's certainly been a topic of conversation, Commissioner. People want to come to Oregon in part because of cannabis tourism. More states are legalizing it, obviously, but we're still fairly unique in that regard. And so there's about 10% of the tourists that come to Oregon for cannabis. And there's a lot of opportunity there for whoever to make some money and provide what those visitors are looking for. And so there are hotels that are offering packages not for smoking rooms, but for example, in the Hood River area, you can get their 420 package, which involves a $50 gift card to a local dispensary, and then you can do with that what you will. But yeah, it's a growing segment of the tourism industry, so we are hearing more about it.
One other thought. One thing that's good to be mindful of is on a state level, no other states, I believe, have completely legalized social consumption. But some municipalities that are maybe a little bit more, have a little bit more progressive on this. Denver and Las Vegas are both looking at sort of social consumption lounges. So as the next legislative session comes and regulation comes up, it'll be good to work with you guys and your counterparts in those areas to sort of look at how those regulations have taken place, the pros and cons, look at best practices. And one other thing I wanted to touch on, I think one key thing with this is, again, making sure that the frontline staff that would be both serving alcohol and cannabis are well-trained and well-equipped to handle those things. And another thing I've appreciated Orla's assistance on has really been a leader in helping us kind of look at our training practices. So I just wanted to thank you and the organization for that as well.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner. Yeah, we're excited about the opportunities within the educational area as well.
So you're gonna be coming every quarter just to say hello, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, well, my suggestion to you is that next time you come here, you do make a presentation to us. And although you have a wonderful relationship with staff, and I understand that, we have 7 commissioners, and at least 5 of us are not as apprised every day of what's going on with you guys as we should be.
Certainly.
So this is your opportunity to enlighten us. We're not asking for we're asking for a 30,000-foot overview, not a 5-foot high detail.
I won't get us down into the weeds, Chair.
Okay, but it's really kind of important. I mean, it was, to me, this issue on the marijuana is important, obviously, and it's great that you brought it up here. But, for the next 3 months, you're gonna have some issues that are gonna come in front of us, so give us a little bit more detail the next time.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. She's the boss. For the record, Commissioner Raval and Commissioner Floyd are absent today, and their absence is excused, and I should be ashamed of myself for not doing that. Thank you. They used to do that for me when I was in the legislature and never showed up. Okay, agent store appointment, retail services, and there he is.
Morning, Chair Rosenbaum.
Good
Commissioners.
morning.
For the record, Brian Fleming, Director of Retail. Welcome, new Commissioner Palcic. And we'll try and take you through these. There may be some questions today. I think I'm prepared to answer those since you haven't had any orientation with confirmation yesterday. So with that, we'll get started. Today we have a resignation in the city of Vail, Oregon, far eastern Oregon. This comes as a result of Debbie, the agent, retiring after 19 years. I have traveled to the store. It's really a little Quonset hut in rural farming community. We have one applicant today. The reason the one applicant is here is because it's not a traditional non-exclusive, and so delegation of authority is to you to appoint exclusive stores. With that said, I'll bring up our applicant for this store, Teresa Duran. This store annual volume, $300,000. Morning, go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cool. So Teresa, just remember to state your name for the record and try and speak into here so they can hear you. So you don't have to struggle.
I apologize. You work 6 weeks on this and then you come up and you can't talk, so. I'm Teresa Duran. I live in Vail, Oregon. And I'm applying for the Vail liquor store. I have worked for Debbie Scott since September, off and on part-time. So I'm familiar with that business. But as you can tell, I have index cards, and they're bigger than normal. They're a recipe card, and I believe that I have the recipe to bring the Vail Liquor Store into better sales, some brighter ideas. And out of my 35 years of retail experience, I've been self-employed for 25 years. And I've been the bookkeeper, the human resource director, the sales clerk, the cook, and the person at 5 a.m. out pumping gas to help someone else.
Look at there.
Thank you. One of my biggest accomplishments that I'm so proud of is the fact that my husband and I built a store in Sumter, which is what is now Agency 1099. And I had it for almost 20 years. 3 years after building the business, we were able to move it from a different location to mine, and I held that contract for 16 years. But as you notice in the book, there's various, and I wanted to show you where Vail was located in the state of Oregon, for some of you who haven't been there. So I've traveled almost 400 miles to not have a voice. But Vail's known for its history and it being on the Oregon Trail. So I wanted you to see, because the plan is to design and restructure with some history in it and make it a little bit more presentable than just the Quonset huts that Brian referred to. So my goal for the Vail Liquor Store, it's simple. I would like to provide good, prompt, courteous service and make sure that our customers are receiving new product. Right now, it's the pretty much, if that's what the good old boys have done, there's no new product coming in. There's no fluff to it, nothing that just says, you know, all it says is I'm a store, come on in. And so I will be adding a neon open sign. Right now, there's a little plastic sign and you can't tell whether she's open or not, so. This store has so much potential to growth. The only problem is the walls don't grow. So I will be looking as the opportunity arises, and I don't know how many of you have been to Vail, but there's not a lot of options, but we are looking at exploring some, or who knows, maybe down the road somebody will build a new building and we can negotiate for a space there. In your packet, I've included a copy of the financials that I got from the current agent. And with those financials in mind, I would like to request that when you appoint me as agent 1059, that by changing it from an exclusive to a non-exclusive at that time of possession. And the reason being is by doing that, I can expand into beer and wine and add a few more items that to help bring in some more business and bring in some more options. As it is, you know, they don't realize that that's all there is right now. It's just the alcohol, and I'd like to see some more ideas and some more things in there. The building itself, there's room if it is relocated, or if there's within the building, the current building, we can move some items around, and with the help of the district manager, I think we can rearrange some items and some products, maybe get rid of some old or some slow stuff, and add in some coolers so that we've got room for more product. I have a contractor that I've spoken with. And right now, there's a 1960s counter that's like 9 feet long. And by removing that 9-foot counter, we're planning on taking it out and building a 6-foot counter made out of blueboard pine and juniper. And that counter is currently being designed to look like an old-fashioned back bar, like with the chrome footrest on it. So I don't know if any of you have seen the old antique back bars and things. So we're kind of trying to change and go with part of Vale's theme of the history and start, planning some decorating with that. That's something that can be easily done in the Vale store until a bigger location is found. And when looking for relocating, I know that when the time arises and we can find a suitable location with some off-street parking and some more space, I will be ready to, address the issues of the building if we need to paint it or if we need new floors or, I'm sorry. At the current location, there's a security system, and when I leave that building, it will not be able to be moved. So we'll put in a new security system with cameras and things. The current location, its retail space is 16 feet by 20 feet. So it'll be nice if it's not very big. So it'll be nice when the time arises that we can go for a bigger area and put in more product. Sorry.
You can cut it short if it's
Yeah.
really hurting you.
I'm
Don't worry
sorry.
about it.
It is.
It-
It's,
Believe you.
it's a struggle.
We will remember you for a long time.
The bad part is we were joking about 3 weeks ago. Wouldn't it be terrible if I got laryngitis at the commission meeting?
It's okay.
And I
Don't-
just woke up with
Don't,
this 2 days ago.
don't worry about it. Does anybody have any questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Mike.
Jared, thank you so much for accepting this responsibility. It's huge for the state of Oregon that we can find people that really take at heart the enforcement and distribution of spirits. Tell me about your relationship with Vail High School.
I graduated from there, and Vail's very sports oriented.
Mhm.
So is that where you know Vail High School from?
Yes, but I do know that,
Social responsibility as it relates to
yeah,
you.
your responsibility to the,
Yeah. No, I'm very adamant about children and responsible people and responsible children and no,
okay, all right.
where the current store is, it's like, must be 10, 12 blocks away from the high school. And I like that, but no, there's,
I mean, are you going to participate in the high school in regards to the activities of abstention from alcohol, or are you going to have a presence, or normally, in the business that you're in, it's something that we in education try to make sure we address
okay.
directly.
I hadn't thought about it, but yeah, absolutely. That would be perfect.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah, I participate a lot with the FFA program, but
Mhm.
that's,
I mean, programs need support. They do. Yeah. I mean, and your recognition of kids is really important too, because then you can defer and,
exactly, and set example.
okay, all right.
Community partnerships with youth and preventing them from getting alcohol.
Absolutely.
Okay, there you go.
Is that
Yeah.
fair?
Yeah, thanks, Terry.
Yeah, I apologize.
Any other questions? I have just one. This is a really small little community. Everybody knows each other. What's the nearest establishments that's selling beer and wine to your store?
The grocery store is probably a half a mile
Okay.
to the east.
Okay. The commission will now go into executive session to deliberate on the agent selection pursuant to the authority of ORS 192.660, sub 2, sub A. If there are members of the media present, representative of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. Representative of the media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decisions may be made in an executive session. We'll return to open session in this room. Is there another one behind? Okay, we'll go.
Go ahead.
Thanks.
So under the next one, so if it's your wish, we'll deliberate on both after Ryan Green. So
Well,
Ryan,
yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out. Thank
so-
you.
So this next appointment is a permanent appointment for temporary agent Ryan Green. This comes as a result of
Oh, yeah, okay.
Dorsey Green's retirement due to medical reasons. I could tell you I met Dorsey 10-plus years, 8 years ago, was appointed to Portland, then moved along to Springfield to develop the store, and Springfield has done an outstanding job for the commission. It's unfortunate that he can no longer work in the store, but his son has been working alongside him for the almost exact amount of time. So with that, under the plan, what you'll see is most of this is a future plan, which is incorporated at the back. By the way, this is under a spouse-child 471.752 in terms of preference, and this does come before you periodically. Staff does not have delegation of authority to appoint these, or our administrator. Basically, in a nutshell, when Dorsey Green left this store, he'd already done new shelves, new fixtures, new flooring, and so this is a pretty premier store in a really tight space. Ryan Green is committed to moving it. He's had a couple fall through, but he's ready to go all in with doubling down on larger space, the addition of all the other items, liquor, beer, wine, additional accessories, and create that one-stop shop convenience. The current anchor tenant that was in this area has now since closed, and so he's looking for other areas. If there are questions, Ryan is here with us today, if there's any questions for him as it relates to the future operation of the store.
Any questions?
I'd just like Ryan, Chair, just Ryan to come on up.
Come on up, Brian.
And I'd like to say thank you to you for your dad, that, what he did as while I was a commissioner, so thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you, yeah.
It's real important to have a presence.
Yeah,
All
definitely.
big men need a presence.
So real quickly, if you look at his overall application, we have 0 problems in this store as it relates to the reporting and monies, because you can clearly see that he's a graduate with a finance degree, so we expect him to be on time and accurate.
0% discrepancy yesterday in the audit, too.
0% discrepancy. So, any other questions for Ryan?
No. Anybody? Do I have to read that all? We're back in session. We have a couple of motions.
Chair,
Commissioner?
I move to appoint Teresa Duran as the permanent agent of store 1059 Vale, effective June 1st, 2019.
Commissioner Curran?
Yes.
Commissioner Harper?
Yes.
Commissioner Melides?
Yes.
Chair Rosenbaum?
Yes. Commissioner Harper?
Did I say yes? Oh, no.
You got the next one.
Chair, I move to appoint Ryan Green as the permanent agent for store 1196, Springfield East, effective June 1st, 2019.
Commissioner Curran?
Yes.
Commissioner Harper?
Aye.
Commissioner Melides?
Yes.
Chair Rosenbaum?
Yes. Thank you and congratulations.
Hey, we can clap. Business opportunity. 5-hour drive back home.
It's
Open that
worth it.
store. They open till 10. We didn't touch one of those hours.
We're on compliance.
Oh, she got a box.
Dun, 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 dun. Who's taking?
Are you
this seat
ready?
today?
I am ready.
Let's
guess
take the
before-
alcohol violations first.
Good morning, members of the commission, and welcome to our new commissioner. My name is Mary Ann Christian. I am the case presenter with APMP. And starting with alcohol, we have 7 stipulated settlement agreements here for your review and approval. And I'm available for questions.
Commissioners?
Chair, we still have some violations in regards to service permits. I think prior to this discussion, we had the representative from the Oregon Restaurant and Lodging Association give us a presentation. Maybe he can help support these business owners by having something about service permit in his magazine. I think we should forward that to Greg and his people because it's something that's, Chair, you talk about each month where we meet, so service permits are very, very, very important, so.
I second that. It's a key issue, and I think working hand in hand with working with our counterparts in the industry, and I know Commissioner Floyd was particularly concerned about this issue, but it's the service permit thing. I think there's room for improvement and room for looking at that. So thank you for that comment.
Okay, if there's no other questions, I have one. Actually, I have 2. Number 5, Emma Rosenberry, co-licensee, Forrest Rosenberry. You've got almost the exact same factual situation between number 5 and number 6. The only distinction is that there was an injury involved in one and not the other. Yet, and you put 10 days for aggravation because it resulted in injury. But number 5, you have a $4,900 fine for. Number 6, which is, you have a $600 fine for. It's basically the same exact factual situation except for the injury. I know how you score it, but even as you're scoring it, how do you make a distinction between one being $600 and the other one being $4,900, $4,950? That made no sense to me.
Thank you, Chair Rosenbaum. Members of the commission, the difference is that Pitches East is a licensee. They're on one schedule for penalty. The number 6 is a permittee. So we are penalizing both the business and the person that's served. The person that's served, which is the one under number 6, the permittee, under our rule, permittees just pay lower fines than permittees pay less than licensees.
So on number 6, you got a $600 fine, and that's because
Because it's the employee rather than the business.
but the business has the same, it's the same factual situation, it's the same
It is the same.
gross
Now,
negligence, if you want to put it that way. Is there something wrong with that, or is it, I'm just reading it wrong?
the difference again is because under our rules, permittees and licensees are on different payment schedules. So the rule assumes that the employee has less money to pay, and so we are fining them different than what we do the business. But in this particular set of facts, both the employee that did the service to the visibly intoxicated person and the business that was responsible for it were both penalized according to the schedule that we have.
No, I understand that, I'm just not,
I
there's
think if-
nothing unfair about it, I don't know.
Well, and that would be part of the greater conversation about whether the penalty
Right.
schedule is appropriate.
Right. And that's my point, really. That's what I'm trying to get to. And number 7, the Club Sinrock, that's a,
Mhm.
Sinrock, that's a,
Sinrock?
I mean, I read this, I don't know if the other commission members have the same feelings as I do on this thing, but, you know, that, when we're gonna get it in the marijuana, and what I like about the marijuana penalties now is that there is a conscious effort to look at whether or not there's been a disregard for the law. And I like that, because I think that's the criteria. But if you looked at this Sinrock, is this a conscious disregard for the law? My answer is yes. I'm gonna vote no on number 7, because I think they should be suspended, they should lose their license. But again, do you look at, and that's something that, you know, we're gonna be discussing, obviously, but is this a conscious disregard for the law? I think it is.
Chair Rosenbaum, I think staff sees this a little bit differently. This is a domestic violence event that occurred within the facility that the staff at Club Sinrock acted to protect, acted to appropriately within the facility itself. The problem is that once they closed the door to protect the staff inside, they neglected to continue outside to assure that law enforcement had been called and that the domestic violence incident had stopped. So they believe they were acting correctly to protect their business and the people inside. Their failure came from what happened outside, which...
Yeah, but you've had problems with this place before.
Which is why they are on an enforceable compliance plan.
And which is my point. I mean, this is not an isolated incident. This, you know, domestic violence is, you know, incredibly important to prevent. In the same token, this is just not the only, okay, so, I don't know, let's just, why don't we just take, each, well, I'm gonna vote no on 7.
Do you wanna just take the first
Take the
6?
first, let's take the first 6 and vote on them.
Chair?
Yeah.
I move to ratify the 6 stipulated settlement agreements as proposed by staff, 1 through 6. Stipulated settlement agreements as proposed by staff.
The one excluding Sinrock?
Okay, Commissioner
Yes.
Kern,
Yes.
Commissioner Harper,
Yes.
Commissioner Melides,
Yes.
Chair Rosenbaum.
Yes. Now, we take number 7 separately.
Yeah,
Michael, go ahead.
I move to ratify the Club Sinrock stipulated settlement agreement, which is number 7,
Commissioner
as
Kern,
proposed by staff. No, it's okay. Yes.
Commissioner Harper,
Yes.
Commissioner Melides,
Yes.
Chair Rosenbaum.
No.
Next, for your consideration, we have 9 marijuana violation stipulated settlement agreements.
Any questions?
Chair? We still have this compliance issue in regards to security footage. Are we at the commission, are we doing a better job at letting our business owners understand the amount of time those tapes have to be on and the locations they have to be pointed to?
Commissioner Harper, that's outside of my division, but my impression from what I'm hearing is that we are, that as the compliance staff go out, they're doing quite a good job of making sure that licensees are aware of camera placement, camera footage requirements.
And do we have, and do you as the enforcement arm have leeway and to give some of these businesses the benefit of the doubt in regards to the direction of the camera or the visual footage taping, or when your people go out, are they educating or are they just enforcing?
Again, that's outside of what APMP does. They are able to do a great deal of education. They are able to do what are called verbal instruction, where they talk with the licensee about what the rules are and they can help them. If it gets to APNP, the rules are quite clear that they have to have a minimum of this and placement here and there. We don't have the leeway.
Remember that we did on first offense, though, give them a break on the camera video issue. And I do think, that was characterized as absolutely right. We did a better job in the field, but I think the biggest educational message now is actually your actions that have been pretty consistent as a commission on cameras, video, footage. The industry has the message. They know they need to comply with these standards. So we are doing less education, more enforcement when we see those violations, and in part it's because our sanctions schedule, now gives it a less penalty on the first offense. So we've moved into, I think, a moderated sanctioning mode rather than purely educational, but it's having also the benefit of educating the industry overall and knowing the seriousness of which we are taking the issue.
Anybody? Any other? Well, Senate Bill 218 is, where is it now on this final passage, hopefully?
218 is still unscheduled. It's moving forward, I believe. It may, if they don't take, they're considering some, I think, timing changes perhaps in the bill. We actually met with two chairmen and Representative Fahey yesterday. So I expect to see some forward progress, but as you know, the timing of the committees are closing and their consideration, so if it continues, it may go to a different committee. The speaker may have to put it in rules to continue some work if they want to take.
The reason I mentioned 218 for the audience and for anybody who's listening to this is that that's a bill that calls for a moratorium on producers' licenses or where we have to issue them. So that's a very a critical piece of legislation that the governor is pushing, and obviously we, as an agency, wholeheartedly agree with. So we're asking for a moratorium on new licenses. At the same time, we're looking at these, I'm looking at these issues that come before the commission in terms of compliance. And on marijuana violations, I just said 5 minutes ago, and I'm very pleased with the staff because you're looking at this, is there a disregard for the law? And you have come to the conclusion that on number 6 and number 9, there is a disregard for the law, and that we, you're asking for a cancellation of the license, and I totally agree with that. we can't be in a position, and I'm only talking for myself, obviously, but we can't be in a position of asking for a moratorium on licenses and then looking at some of these cases over here and giving them the benefit of the doubt when there's a total disregard for the law. It doesn't make any sense to me, and this is not something that I've said for the first time. I've been on my high horse on this since I've been here, and I'm not gonna change on it. And this is a privilege, it's not a right. And so I'm gonna, on number 5, IMF Farms, it's a $9,200 fine. In my opinion, it's a disregard for the law. On number 8, it's just as iffy, night culture, Nightwood horticulture. To me, it's a disregard for the law, so rather than, prolong this thing, if you're gonna make a motion, I wish somebody would go to make a motion on everything except 5 and 8. And I'm gonna vote against those two because I think we should have cancellation of those if we don't send the message, it's silly. It's just silly. So, from my point of view, Commissioner Harper, if you would make a motion, do so on all except number 5 and number 8 we'll take separately.
Chair, I move to ratify, ratify stipulated settlement agreements number 1, 2, 3, 4,
6.
6, 7, 9.
Right. Thank you.
Commissioner Curran,
Yes.
Commissioner Harper,
Yes.
Commissioner Melinas,
Yes.
Chair Rosenbaum.
Yes. Well, let's take these two separately. Commissioner, would you make a motion on one and then the other?
Yes. I move to ratify the marijuana stipulated settlement agreements for numbers 5 and 8 as proposed by staff.
Question?
Yes.
You want them together or separate?
It doesn't matter. I'm gonna vote against both of them.
Does anybody want
That's
to
all right.
vote separately on this?
Unless anybody is
Would you
gonna
like to vote
vote
separately on this?
with me, then we should do them separate. Let's do them separately.
I mean, yeah, only comment I've got is, because I'm with you, I mean, we do have to send a message. And you've brought this issue up too, is that we're not allowed to discuss these beforehand, and we don't. When we are rescinding licenses, I know how thoughtful we have to be, and generally, I kind of go with the staff's opinion on this stuff. I do wish we were able to talk before, because I think it's certainly worth a discussion if we're gonna rescind. So I always, generally we're aligned in thinking. I don't wanna, I guess what all I'm trying to say is before I vote on any of it, I don't know that I'm fine separating them. I just wanted to kind of put on the record that we can't discuss these before, and so, generally if it's I generally tend to go along with staff's recommendation, but it's well worth our time and thought to be able to kind of figure out a way to maybe discuss these beforehand, if that's at all possible, because these are big decisions we're making. So I guess I'm saying I'm in agreement. I'm just wishing there was a process that we could be more deliberate in our discussions on this.
To be quite candid, the process, and the reason I'm doing this for the last couple of meetings is that the only way that we can really get across our feelings on this, because of our limitations, is to vote no so that the staff understands some of our feelings on it. And I think they're doing a great job. I mean it. I think you're doing a great job of starting to understand where we're coming from. But in light of the limitations we have, this is the only way we can do it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
So, until we send that message, and that message is coming across. I'm pleased with where it's going. So, let's take them separately.
All right, Chair, I move to ratify The marijuana stipulated settlement agreement for number 5, as proposed by staff.
Commissioner Kern,
Yes.
Commissioner Harper,
Yes.
Commissioner Melinas,
Yes.
Chair Rosenbaum.
No.
Chair,
Commissioner?
I move to ratify the marijuana stipulated settlement agreement for number 8, as proposed by staff.
Commissioner Kern,
Yes.
Commissioner Harper,
Yes.
Commissioner Melinas,
Yes.
Chair Rosenbaum.
No.
Chair, may I make a comment as well?
Yes, of course.
I agree with what the chair has said about Senate Bill 218 is going to cause us to have some more careful thought of the industry, because we want the very best producers, and we don't want the producers who got there first necessarily to have a monopoly on the market. And so I do think it's important. I agree with the chair on this point that we will need to, at that point, be assessing how are we going to keep producers there because we have more waiting in the wings that could be better, more compliant producers for us. And so that is an issue separate than, say, the liquor licenses that we're looking at, but the marijuana side of things, where we're just pumping up on the enforcement side and learning more about as we're getting into the field. But I think for the Senate Bill 218, if that passes, we are going to have to be much more careful about who we have as our licensees. So, because there will be at a point where a licensee that expires or is canceled, or 1 or 2 or 1 or 2 or 3, that we can let somebody else in who might be more compliant. So that'll be something that I will be interested in working with the commission to, and working with the agency to do. So.
Chair, could I just add one thought? I think Jennifer's, Commissioner Kern is right on with that. The one thing I'd say is that there are folks, willful disregard of our regulations and the law is never acceptable. And I think when that's the case, we've got to find those people and to have them choose other opportunities. The one thing I'll say is there's a lot of folks that have been in the industry and kind of slogged it out with us through all this. And I think that as much as we want new licensees and other people, this has been, for the people in the industry, it has been hard to come along with all of our regulations and figure it out. And there's been some people that have earnestly tried. And I think, well, we do need to get the bad actors out. We also should always be mindful that there's a lot of folks that have, with their best efforts, tried to work with us in the commission, and sometimes it's hard to reflect that in black and white and the reports we see in front of us. But I think your sentiments are accurate. We do need to have a great compliant industry, and some of that will come from new people coming in, and some of it will come from people that have gotten in from the beginning, learning and evolving with us. So that's just to add to that sentiment.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, a couple things. One, I appreciate the instruction on the stipulated settlements. I think it's valuable to us and how we gauge them, how we look at them, and how we refine our own process. So I think it's entirely constructive and greatly appreciate that. Technical correction on 218, it doesn't impose a moratorium yet. It gives
it's
this
our
commission the
discretion, yeah.
opportunity to constrain, impose a moratorium, caps. But I also say that I think this discussion you just had, the sentiments that were expressed here about new entrants versus the embedded licensees is a discussion that the legislature too is having, much like this one, and much the same sediment coming out in that conversation in the legislature as well. So I think the commission is well poised to fulfill, the obligations that would come with 218 if it makes it through the process.
The last comment I want to make is that I'm obviously in the minority position on this commission at this time, but from the comments that were made this morning, I think especially the producers, they should read it carefully, because that minority opinion is, I believe, going to be the majority opinion before long. And nobody should be surprised on what we do in the future. Thank you. Licensing stipulated settlement agreements, Winnie's Lounge.
We actually have two, Chair Rosenbaum. We have Winnie's Lounge, and you should also have.
Downtown Market.
Downtown Market. And I'm available for questions.
Any questions? You know, the trouble is, I read all this stuff, we all do, and please explain to me, Winnie's Lounge is a problem, a big problem. Why are we doing this? I mean, why are we giving a license to the wife rather than the husband, putting in all these restrictions on a place that is gonna be nothing but problems? I mean, it's a legitimate question. I mean, why are we doing this?
Chair Rosenbaum, it is a legitimate question. We are doing this, the husband, as you stated, the property did have issues in the past that directly involved the husband. The husband has been excluded from the property. And what staff has done is given the wife short-term permits to be allowed to prove. So she's had 120 days to show the agency that she's able to comply with these requirements, that she's able to keep her husband out of the property, out of the business, and the business is doing just fine, and staff does not have concerns about issuing this license because she's demonstrated over the last 120 days that she's able to comply with the agreement that she's making.
Where did I miss the 120 days?
And I apologize, it doesn't appear to be in the synopsis.
Yeah,
Good morning,
why-
Chair. Oh, good morning, Chair Rosenbaum. I'll explain that. So this was a change of ownership application, and so when we do a change of ownership, the new applicant is able to get a temporary letter of authority to operate, and they can do 90 days with a 30-day extension, and that's what we're talking about
So
here.
why isn't it in our,
It's not part of it's a temporary license. They don't have hearings rights. We agree to give them a temporary letter of authority to operate while we're investigating the application. We did that with restrictions, and she has complied with the restrictions, and there have been no problems at the premises. So this is for the final license.
okay, but I understand that, but you're giving this for us to read and make a decision, right? So I read all this stuff. If you would have put in here that it was a 120-day license and that they have to come back and prove that, you know, I'd vote yes on it. I was gonna vote no on this, but my point is, in the future, when we have these type of situations, I think you need to put that in there. I mean, it's a big difference. Would it make a difference to you?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Chair Rosenbaum. I think that's a very good suggestion, and in the synopsis, we will include that information if it is relevant.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And I assume on the downtown market, it's a restricted license, so what is it, 120 days still?
Chair Rosenbaum, that's a very different situation. That was an existing licensee at one location. She wanted to move her premises to a different location that had been canceled for a history of serious and persistent problems. She is putting in a completely different operation. These particular restrictions are just to make sure that any problems that arose in the past will not arise again. So it's a little bit of a different situation. She has not been operating at the new premises, but she has been operating at her previous location with no problems.
So, okay, so.
And that
let's-
was a last-minute addition, so if the synopsis is
I
a
got
little
it.
skinny, we apologize.
On Winnie's Lounge, and there's probably gonna be a couple of others coming up, they always come up, they're similar to this. Is there a process where we're spending the time and effort looking at this thing, it's our responsibility. I'll vote for this because of that 120 days, but after the 120 days, can we ask you, can we command you, is a better way to put it, to come back to us after 120 days and tell us what's going on with this thing? I don't wanna give approval on this. This offends me to a certain extent in terms of the factual situation. I'll vote for it, but I'd like to know after 120 days whether or not she actually did her job on this, or is in compliance, Or better yet, if she's not in compliance and you shut it down, that will give us a good indication of what to look for the next time.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
But Kelly, we can only do so many of these extensions, and then we have to make the decision or they
Right.
close. We only get
Right.
the two.
Mhm.
So they,
Right.
if we don't make a recommendation on the application before that, they're not able to operate and sell liquor in that intervening time until we make a recommendation on the license to you. Normally, we try to make that recommendation before the second extension is complete, before they hit their deadline.
I'm not following. The second extension is when? When's the first extension?
Chair Rosenbaum, are you talking about approving their license today and then coming back with an update on how they're doing, or are you talking?
You said that there's 120 days for her to comply with everything.
She
that
has
you-
already, she's already done the
It's
120 days. At this point, we don't have a mechanism to continue a temporary permit. We would need to approve the permit and go and check on them, or not approve the permit, which would not allow them to operate.
So, again, you know, I've looked at this for now a year. I don't have all the answers to it. You're telling me now that the 120 days has already expired. She's done what she's supposed to do.
Correct,
There was
And now there was no other problems involved.
correct.
No other problem.
No other problems.
And what do you do to determine whether there's problems in that?
Well, we have compliance staff that can work with them to make sure that there are no problems.
Do you have people that go and check it out?
Well, AP&P doesn't, but the compliance staff does.
Right.
They work, licensing works very closely with these businesses to make sure that they are complying with what they're agreeing to do.
Do you have a written report as to what you did over those 120 days to determine that there was no violations?
That would be a question for licensing. I don't know.
Do we have access to that report?
Chair Rosenbaum, if there's no problems at a premises, there isn't usually anything documented. We document when there's verbal instruction or violations. What we're relying on is the inspector going out to the premises and seeing what's going on, speaking with the licensee, looking to see if there's any police reports that have been generated, and if the inspector, in working with the licensee and, isn't seeing any problems, that's what we're going off of. So there wouldn't be any paper if there aren't any problems,
And
except,
there's no paper, there's no problem.
correct. I mean, they document in their notes, whether or not violations have been observed, and they communicate that to us.
So our staff doesn't do it, we just rely on whether there's a police report or something along
Our
those
staff
lines.
does go out to the premises, and they also are talking with the local PD to determine if there are problems at the premises.
And does our staff do a written report as to what they did over those 120 days?
There wouldn't be a summary of that, what happened during that temporary letter of authority, no.
Would there be a summary, I'm sorry, but I want to know this so that
Sure,
in the
sure.
future, would there be a summary of what they did to actually determine that? Do they write a log down saying, we went there on so-and-so and date and talked to so-and-so people?
Inspectors, every time they go out into the field, will keep a logbook of where they go. When we have a case that's, pending settlement, we then reach out to that particular inspector and say, we're exploring settlement. Can you please talk to us about what's going on at the premises? And we then, and that's part of our determination about whether to move forward with the settlement. And in conversing with them, we learn whether or not there have been problems at the premises. They look back into what they've observed. They look for any documentation that they've created. They, work with the local PD, and based on that information that we receive from them, we decide whether to move forward with settlement.
Okay. All right, that's helpful to me. I hope it's helpful.
Yeah, it's really helpful. It's,
So in the future, please put down the fact that the 120 days has already gone by, there was no problems with it. It makes a big
Absolutely.
difference. Okay. Somebody want to make a motion?
Chair, I move to ratify the 2 stipulated settlement agreements as proposed by staff.
Commissioner Kern?
Yes.
Commissioner Harper?
Yes.
Commissioner Molinas?
yes.
Chair Rosenbaum?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Bill? We have have to determine whether our executive director is extravagant or not? Is that?
I don't know the number.
Chair Rosenbaum, Commissioners, for the record, Bill Schutte, Chief Financial Officer for the Liquor Control Commission. OLCC policies and procedures require an annual review of the Executive Director's financial transactions. This is a once-a-year report that I give to the Commission. As a little background, this is not just for OLCC, but it's for all state agencies. Executive Directors of agencies often will have a high amount of authority. As part of the Oregon accounting manuals and controls on that, the Department of Administrative Services has determined that the Chief Financial Officer or the Director of Financial Services for agencies need to review and approve the Director's expenses, time reports, spending, that sort of thing related to the agency. I review the Director's timesheets, I review the Director's expenses, I sign off on them. Per this policy, accordingly, I report that the information to the board, and by the way, this is in the first tab under administration of the memo I sent to you last week. I report the following information to the board for transactions of fiscal year ending June 30th, 2018. Time reporting, I approve all the director's timesheets. There are no anomalies there. They are in accordance with all appropriate policies. There were no vacation payouts for the executive director during the fiscal year. Travel executive director's expenses and reimbursements were reviewed upon submission for accuracy and adherence to state policies, and they were all authorized, all were found to be valid and substantiated by appropriate reporting and documentation. Spots, that's the agency credit cards that we use for spending. Expenses charged to the commission credit card were reviewed upon submission for accuracy and adherence to state policies, and for authorized expenditures. All transactions were found to be valid and substantiated by appropriate supporting documentation. Attached is a table of the executive director's travel expenses over last year. And with that, I'll close and take any questions.
I don't have anything.
Is this Chair, do we have to approve this? Is there a motion need to be
Yeah.
said?
Yeah.
It's on the backside.
I move to approve the expenses of the executive director.
Commissioner Kern,
Yes.
Commissioner Harper,
Yes.
Commissioner Melides,
Yes.
Chair Rosenbaum.
Yes. Steve, do you have any comments?
None whatsoever. I didn't even look at it.
You should travel a little more.
Yeah. All right.
Take a little more vacation.
Absolutely. Well deserved.
That vacation payout thing is interesting.
All right, Chair.
No exotic places? The next item is, I guess, mine, civil penalty sanction schedule. The commission had I think, an excellent meeting with staff at the close of the last commission meeting in April. And the OLCC has the authority to change its process for determining and assessing civil penalties. To do so, we have to amend or add rule language that gives notice to, that we may impose civil penalties on a per-act basis as opposed to an aggregate penalty for a group of acts. And I think we had a really productive meeting. We can't do anything except in an open meeting, which is fine, and that's what we're doing here right now. So I really like to throw this out to the commission, including our new commissioner. There's no votes on this, so that you're in good shape this morning. Can I get some feedback and feelings about looking at just, directing staff to look at potential rulemaking on this issue on a per-act basis as opposed to an aggregate penalty?
Sure, I can kick it off. I think I second the fact we did have a fantastic discussion last commission meeting. We got into a lot of conversations about sort of different philosophies and how we'd like to see things. And I think, to me, it's there's a piece of it that's almost missing in addition to the sanctions is the training. And I keep going back to that because there's a pretty clear line, I think we touched on it today, and it keeps coming up, willful disregard for the law versus maybe a misunderstanding. And I think that there's some tools may be missing from our toolbox to look at ways that we can address this. And I think frankly it's an ongoing discussion, but I have how can I put it? The challenge I've got is people that could maybe rectify the situation. We get them in compliance, get them in business, get them trained so that there isn't a second violation. That's one category. The folks that are habitual line steppers or rule breakers, I think that we've got to have tools to, I guess, carrots and sticks. We've got to have the sticks to be able to get them in compliance, and I think that's where this sanctioning really comes in. I know it's more of a digression instead of a specific prescription for how we should act, but that's sort of my general sentiments on it.
Commissioner?
I agree with, we had a great conversation. I would start, my comment with, I don't want to lose what we have on the sanctions schedule. I think that, I think it's important to have consistency, predictability with the schedules. I think that is highly important to myself, and I worry about some of, in particular, and one of the reasons why I defer to staff so often is because you're on the ground, you're talking with these people, you're meeting with these people, you have that discretion to see what their tone of voice is. How are they, do they seem like they really want to come in compliance? Are they going to get that done? Do they have that motivation? And you can judge a variety of things that we are unable to do. And so I start there. I also think that it's important, so starting there, that consistency and predictability have to be part of it, and I think we have a lot of that. And if we are reaching out to try and have some additional tools in our toolbox, I don't want to lose the consistency or predictability that we have. And if we do that, in my opinion, if we are unable to do that, I would rather keep, for the good of the order, if we're getting it 90% right, I would rather keep that good than trying to reach for some of these exceptional cases or these unique cases and trying to get things right with them where we might lose doing a good job on some of the more common cases. So I would urge to say, my comment to staff, if we are going to be reviewing this, is to maintain the consistency and predictability that we have and reach for more tools if we can for some of those cases. In my opinion, what I got from the meeting, where I would actually like to see some discussion, is pointed out to me that on the marijuana side, that there may be more ways that producers or other licensees are able to manipulate the days versus fines in a way that, for example, if they are able to pick between the two of them, and on one of the, and the days for them, they're saying, well, we're going to be on vacation, or we're not producing that time period anyway, so it doesn't hurt us. That's not a real sanction. That's a problem. That's something that we can work with and tweak on the marijuana side. And those are to me are problems that we can identify and see where sanctions are not being appropriately carried forward. And so those things, I think, I would like to take that issue, and if there's other issues like that where we are finding out that our sanction schedule is not working the way that it should, primarily in the marijuana side because it is newer, to address how that would work. And in that particular case, throwing that out there, a suspension then would not be allowed. It would have to be the fine if there's, but seeing how that would go forward is something that certainly is going to take some reasoning and some thought. I'd be happy to contribute, but that's where I took took away, we want to have predictability, we want to have consistency. There are a few places where I think that we can help staff have more tools, and we'd like to do that where we can.
Chair, I believe I was the one that produced the most heated discussion because I
You
believe.
always are.
Well, I believe the state doesn't need more money based upon the inaction or action of a business owner that potentially failed to make a just choice. We experienced this morning where we didn't understand that we had 120 days prior to an issue that we could have went one way or another. We don't, in our position as commissioners, we don't see the entire report. But we do see the schedule that's already been set by us as commissioners in regards to penalties. And I totally and truly believe it is fair and it is just. We've had past history of times where we were not fair and we were not just. And the place we're at today is over decades. It's not something that we just came up with a couple years ago. The review of our penalties are such that we are in a new industry when it comes to marijuana. There's no way that we can have the same penalties towards agriculture than we can a spirit of a product that's already there. And we need to separate the two. And so far we haven't got to that point where we're, 4 days or 45 days. Heck, I don't have to water the grass. I didn't have to water the grass last week, 90 degrees. That's 7 days I'd skip past the penalty. So it is something that we need to look at, but I truly believe it's just not our position. It has to go, it's a larger thing here in regards to what the state believes and what small business owners believe to be, to help them to be profitable. The sanction schedule, I can't and necessarily needs to be tweaked. I don't know how, but when it comes to creating rulemaking to make these changes, that's something I'd like to see us go down the road. But at this point, I just don't believe or feel or that there is a need for a change. I think the system we have is fine.
Commissioner Palcic, I'm not gonna put you on the spot, but if you have any comments, please do. You weren't involved in the
No, I wasn't,
discussion,
but
so it's unfair, but at least I wanna.
This has been great to hear, completely wet behind the ears right now. The only thing that comes to mind to me that I would offer up, and I echo a lot of the points that have been made already, it gets to the why. What is the objective? What are we attempting to accomplish? And if it's merely a sanction to arrive at a penalty, but what's that penalty really trying to accomplish? And what I see, not here so much, but just in general, is it usually becomes a business decision. It becomes a cost of doing business. You heard we're going to weigh whether I'm going to take a time penalty versus a sanction that might be monetary. And in both cases, there could be a business decision how it's made. Is it really the price of doing business? And if that's the case, I don't think we're really getting to the why. And so I go back earlier, the point of how we inject further education, training into it, I think would be, all those folks are important. I think you need all those tools in the toolkit. I don't want to go too much further because, quite frankly, I know absolutely nothing. So, just leave it there.
Thank you, Commissioner. The one thing that I can say 100% is that there's nobody on this commission that's interested in making it difficult for businesses to survive and prosper. We're all here because, we want to make sure that the customers, the agents, the retailers are going to not only survive, but do the best they can. This is, we're a very pro-business organization. There's nobody on this commission that isn't. Having said that, and in particular with the comments of Commissioner Curran, I've been here for a year and a half. We are not trying to tell the staff that they have to change their method of operation. What we're doing is saying, these are added tools in the toolbox that we want to give you to make that job even better. We're not interested in putting anybody out of business. We're not interested in making it harder for anybody to be in business. We are interested in weeding out the people that shouldn't be in business. And that's the tool that we're gonna be looking at, you know. And whatever we come up with, it's still going to have discretion on the part of the staff to implement. Now, if we give you those tools, and then you come back to us 6 months after you have the tools and we see the same problems, then at least we have the tools to say, no, this is what we want, and it's already on the books. So there's safeguards both ways. And there's no downside to doing this. You know, that discussion, I think, you know, with perhaps the exception of Commissioner Harper, we're at the point of looking at this thing and saying, let's go forward, let's give it a shot. We're not taking away anything from anybody. But we do want to keep this as a pro-business agency. If we don't have our customers, we're not going to make any money. So I think we need a motion at this point. I assume we need a motion to ask the staff to proceed with the rulemaking or potential rulemaking on this issue. So I'm looking at you, Stacy. I mean, you're shaking your head yes, right?
Yeah, that's fine. I make just a motion, that staff initiate rulemaking.
Yeah.
Chair, rulemaking for what?
Well, so that could mean a whole bunch of things.
Yeah, I know.
What it could mean is that, staff works to convene, they put together ideas for the commission. And I think you're gonna actually have a very nice presentation right after this, and we'll talk about that. That they can put together some ideas about, based on your conversations about what they wanna do, come back to you and ask for you again to initiate the rulemaking process and go forward into the regular, other groups that they convene to discuss this stuff. This is a little unusual because it's usually initiated from the staff up.
Mm-hmm.
But there's really no, what I'm trying to say, there's not a huge formal process to it at this point. You're directing staff to come back to you with an idea for rulemaking, and then at that time, they'd ask you again to go ahead and initiate the formal rule process.
But-
And that would give them an opportunity to flesh out some ideas, maybe talk to you individually.
So, Council, we currently have rulemaking, and we already have a penalty schedule that we've adhered to for years, and also it's gone through the state in regards to the legislative process. So, Chair, are you asking the staff to come back with a different penalty schedule in regards to the amounts and the time that we?
I believe it's just to initiate rulemaking process, to consider potential tools for us to consider.
So can you put that in your, I need to be direct because I want to make sure that if we share with staff that they need to go look at our sanction schedule. We've had 2 or 3 presentations on our sanctions and our penalty schedules already. If we as a commission, if you're asking for us to review it and have a harder or more penalties in regards to each act, then I think we can be, that directive to the staff would be more concrete and they would know what we're trying to achieve versus if I got the instruction, I'll just come back with our penalties we already have, and here they are.
Well, I think
But
that-
wait a minute, you're missing the point, Michael, Commissioner Harper. We had a very, very detailed, long discussion, last commission meeting. We talked talk specifically about whether or not we can impose civil penalties on a per-act basis as opposed to an aggregate penalty. Period. That's what we're going back in and asking the staff to look at. Period. That's, I mean,
That's what I want in writing. Or that's what I want to propose. That's the
Son.
motion I want to hear, and that's what I'd like to vote on.
My
Mr.
under-
Chairman, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I think staff understands
Yeah.
exactly what you want in terms of a look. This is an informality. This isn't the initiation of the final rulemaking process and the
And that-
real rules.
and
This
that's
is-
exactly why.
You're asking us formally by motion to think about, take your ideas, take your comments, and fashion things that we see, or we believe the commission sees as improvements to our penalty schedule. So we can come back to you with a set of ideas and recommendations to enact those and then initiate the formal rulemaking
Right,
process.
eventually, we're gonna get to what we
Yes.
discussed there, but not today, because we're
Yeah.
just, the
Yeah.
staff understands completely where we're going.
And I
with this.
think we got both things, and we got the values of the commission.
was
One,
my, yeah,
the
my
base
understanding
of the-
our comments
yeah.
would serve as
Yeah.
the base for
yeah.
what to consider. And hopefully that we
We'll
can
get-
each take,
Yeah,
Right.
we're
Understanding-
not at the point right now today
not
to
making any rules.
specifically add rulemaking. We're asking the staff to go back and give us their ideas on what our discussions were. And then we're eventually gonna get to the point that we have to go to where you are. But we're not there now.
I just, Chair, I just want the other commissioners to understand that I don't believe we should be at a point where someone does, there is an infraction in regards to a rule, and what the authority that we're gonna have is we're just gonna rescind your license without the
No.
consent
We're
or
not
work of
anyplace
the.
near, we're not, I just.
Well, that's why, Chair, I wanna make sure that we're direct in regards to, if we direct staff in regards to rulemaking for us, we can currently change a rule from here. So you're asking
No,
staff,
we're not, Mike. We're not Commissioner.
Can I, I
we
think,
can make, we
all that-
make decisions and we can vote yes or no.
Well, the opportunity that you have is to vote no on this, and that would be, you know, I mean,
Okay, there you go, case.
and I would say, Commissioner Harper, I agree largely with what you say, that what we have going works well most of the time. But I also heard from staff that there are some places that possibly if we make some other additional considerations that we can improve upon it. So so moving forward with what Chair Rosenbaum has said, all I would say today is we could make a motion to initiate, initiate the rulemaking process to review the sanctions schedule. And I would say make a presentation of, or to make a proposal of potential rules to address the comments from the commission.
Okay.
It would just be a proposal. We're just making a motion to
And you-
initiate
You just made a motion.
Okay.
Let's go vote on it.
all right.
And Chair, I want to say publicly, and I want to be direct. In regards to sanction rulemaking, this commission has not always been fair. Okay, they have not always been fair. So, again, we've worked really hard to get to where we are today in regards to statewide businesses and such. So, I just want the commission to hear that because of the fact that everybody in the state don't have tons of money. Everybody in the state don't have a Dell Pentium computer. Everybody, we need to have people make mistakes so they can be better. But if they make that mistake, we need to be able to give them an opportunity to get better.
And
So, and irregardless of the extent of the infraction, I am convinced that this commission has the ability to talk to everybody who we give a license to.
4 of the 5 people sitting up here have less than 12 months' experience, and we weren't around, so if they weren't fair in the past, my comments about the interest of the business people still stand.
Well, that's why it's not a lot of business people that look like me. So if I could be more direct, I think we need to
We are.
put that on the table. So I
Well-
just want to make sure you understand that, and we work real hard to get to a business environment where there is a potential opportunity for everybody.
Well, let me just say it again, when I say we're interested in protecting business people, I don't look at it from one color to the next or one religion from the next. Business is business, we want to protect them, period.
Mr. Chairman, this discussion's been great. I think we understand it, but I do want to just mention one thing should be included with this. If we get the authority, we may have increased opportunities for penalties, which will also have to be thought about in how they work in our schedule of sanctions. So that gives us other opportunities to make recommendations to you on that, on the aggravation, on how we protect small business through the rulemaking as well.
Yeah, I mean, that goes without saying.
In-
You know, for the members of the audience, this is kind of interesting because this is the only time we have a chance to discuss this, and it's got to be in front of you, which is fine. But this is how decisions are made, and nobody's arguing about it, but this is our opportunity to have a discussion with the commission, and I think this is great. This is how it should be.
Chair Rosenbaum.
Except for our council, who's always.
We're not ready to rulemaking yet.
No, but, and Commissioner Harper, this might help too. Another way that you can do this is to do the same thing where you direct staff to initiate this process and come back to you. And they can come back to you in a work session. So it'd still be a public meeting, it'd still be recorded, but you'd have that same kind of opportunity that you have in that room or that room over there to have a full-fledged discussion about it before you move further. And so I might offer that as a good solution here.
I thank you for it, but that's gonna happen anyway. None of this is gonna be done in a vacuum. We're gonna have those discussions. I mean, there's no question about it.
But you could ask staff to actually set up a time and a place and direct them to come back to you with proposed alternatives.
Chair, can I amend my motion then?
Yes.
May I amend the motion to include that staff is directed to put together a proposal to present to the commission at a work session as part of the motion?
Same thing, but yeah,
Yes.
that's fine.
Well, our council will be happy with us.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
She's
making me
never
happy is job
completely
number one.
happy.
Yes.
But I rely on you too, so that's good.
All right, so I'll start.
Go-
Commissioner Kern,
Take the
Yes.
roll, please.
Commissioner Harper,
Yes.
Commissioner Molinas,
Yes.
Chair Rosenbaum.
Yes. Good.
So happy not to vote today. I gotta tell you, I'm so happy not to vote.
You'll get keep. Presentation of rulemaking process, Emily? Good morning. Good morning. Well, good morning, Brian.
Morning, Chair.
You're not on there, but you're always welcome.
Well, I'm glad I'm welcome, thank you.
How are we gonna fit another person up here?
I'm gonna swing-
Three
I'm-
more people.
I'm gonna rally my East Coast person here.
I've been dieting, so I'm doing my part, you know.
It's gonna be,
I'm off, but you can't get rid of me though.
I don't wanna get rid of you.
Yeah.
Just don't put Harper and Revolt next to each
I
other.
wouldn't,
Oh, no,
we
I
wouldn't know
know.
what to do without
I know.
Michael.
So, good morning, Chair and Commission. I'm here today, my name is Emily Feblis, and I'm here today to give you guys a short presentation on rulemaking and the rulemaking process. I know we have a couple new commissioners who might value the information, and then maybe a good refresher. And then Bryant is also here.
Yeah, for the record, I'm here to provide color commentary
He's
and answer any questions.
Yeah, I'm gonna say he's gonna help answer questions that you all may have. So, all right, there you We're going to cover a couple topics today. What is a rule? What is rulemaking? What is the rulemaking process? Who can start the rulemaking process? And how long does the process generally take, and why? So, what is a rule? Rules are laws adopted or amended or repealed by a state agency, board, or commission. Rules fill in the gaps left by statutes. They facilitate an open and accountable government. They are codified in the Oregon Administrative Rules. Rules are laws, and you also sometimes hear them called regulations or administrative rules. And so what is rulemaking? Rulemaking is developing or modifying regulations. The power to create rules is delegated by the legislature. They can do that by creating an agency such as the OLCC or commission, and they can do so by creating specific legislation that requires rules to be formed. What is the rulemaking process? The rulemaking process is a process that executive agencies use to create or promulgate regulations. In general, legislatures first set broad policy mandates by passing statutes, and then agencies create the more detailed regulations through rulemaking. So an example of this might be the Americans with Disabilities Act. They would pass the broad act, and then a state agency would determine things like the height that the angle of the wheelchair ramp needs to be able to move a wheelchair up it, or the width needed for a bathroom stall. Those aren't generally included in the overall act. Those are given to agencies to sort of determine with their expertise. So this is sort of a chart on the overall process of how rulemaking goes. So there's the legislature. They're going to pass that broad policy or statute. They pass that through a law or a statute, and then it's given to an agency or commission in our case. And then the staff begins the process generally by drafting some language and asking for stakeholder expertise on that language. And then there's this Rule Advisory Committee open comment period where subject matter experts come in and tinker with the language that staff may have developed. Then it goes to public hearing so that members of the public can come and weigh in on how these rules might affect them, their business, their families. And then finally it'll go to the agency. In a different agency, it might be the executive director. Here it's you guys. And then you guys will approve those rules. You can amend them or you can deny. And so I'm going to go a little bit specifically into how we do it here specifically at the OLCC. So again, that bill is passed. It's given to us. And we start writing those that draft language. If it's about alcohol, if it's about marijuana, if it's about the bottle bill, the folks who are really knowledgeable about that particular topic start drafting language about what might be workable. And then we give it to you guys and we say, okay, we're going to start, we're going to initiate official rulemaking. And so that's when we really get together those advisory committees, those stakeholders, those the industry experts that really know about this topic and how it might affect them, and we start refining that draft language. And then there's notice period. So set in statute, there's a bunch of notice wait times, notices that have to be filed and go to particular agencies. We can't do this thing, we can't pass these things overnight at midnight in the dead of the night without anybody knowing about it. So we file those and our wait times begin for different sections. Nope, oh gosh. Okay, one more. Nope, other way. Okay. And then there's those public comment periods again. That's where members of the general public may come in and speak to us, tell us their concerns or what they like about it or don't like about it. There's also ability for them to submit those in writing. And those are statute set periods that are open for a specific period of time, giving the public plenty of time to tell us about how those rules might be affecting them or their business. And then we will take all of that information we learned from everything and we will create a final set of rules, taking into account everything, all the expertise from many, many different actors. And then we take it to you guys and we say, you know, this is what we came up with, and you guys get to decide whether to adopt those, whether to amend, or whether to deny the proposed rules and send it back for us to take another look at. If you guys decide to approve, then the rules are submitted to be published as law. So, and then there's some paperwork stuff that Bryant and I have to do, which is making a rule file, writing you guys a memo, that kind of thing. But when those rules, when you set an effective date and they become effective, they become law. So who can initiate this rulemaking process? So generally, I would say most of the time, it's probably the OLCC, us, you guys and us, and that's generally to amend existing rules or update rule language that might be obsolete or not working, or many, many different reasons to initiate. And then, of course, like we talked about at the beginning, the legislature can mandate us through something like 218 to create rules about something. And then the public can also initiate rulemaking as well. That's called petitioning. There are some legally required sections that have to be included in a petition for them to petition us to begin rulemaking.
That doesn't happen often, does it?
Chair Rosenbaum, members of the commission, we really work with the public to address issues in that way. I mean, is there something that's reasonable that we can fit into a project that we're working on, a rule package, we implement it that way. If there's something like, before I've been asked to accept a petition where every alcoholic drink must be served with water, I try to work with the person to send them through Orla and other agencies that would give them ideas about how that could be troublesome and not work. So we really work with people on ideas that we see that we could push through without the petition process. But sometimes we do have petitions. The one petition that you guys were working through in the past year was the agent limited license for the on-premises separate location from the retail sales agent. That was petitioned.
What I was trying to get at is, if you have a ballot proposal, you need X amount of signatures and to put it on the ballot. What do you need on petitioning? Is one person can petition us, or is there got to be? Is there anything in the statute that says how many? Or
Chair Rosenbaum, members of the commission, any Oregonian can petition an agency to change a rule. They have to have a valid basis in the law, particularly with the limited license. Using that as an example, the law was broad and had no specific prescription there, so that's why it was a rulemaking issue of do we do this, do we not? We use the petition process to move it forward. So they have to have a factual write-up, and those are the things in front of you there that Emily listed out in her presentation. Facts or arguments supporting the proposed rule, comments on the complexity of the rule, technology and economic factors, and then a draft of the language that comports with statutory requirements.
So on an average, how many petitions do you get a year?
I'd say, Chair Rosenbaum and members of the commission, I'd say in the 5 years that I've been here, we've had about 2 or 3 that were valid, but we moved 2 of those directly into a process that we were already working on. And the only true one that I think has gone through as a full petition is that limited license issue that you guys dealt with last year.
Okay, thank you.
So how long does the rulemaking process take? The rulemaking process can take around 6 months to a year. Again, there's those specific wait times that are set in different stages in the process that all state agencies have to follow. One example is the public hearing cannot be held until notice of that hearing has been published for 14 days. So there are some time periods that we cannot speed up the process because they are mandated to us. These wait times do have important safeguards, so agencies can't just push through rules without giving the public time to comment, to think about those rules. So I know sometimes it seems like it may take a long time, but there are those safeguards that are really important so that the agencies are held accountable to the public and stakeholders. So some final considerations. Advisories, advisory committees, public hearings, comment periods are all important to facilitate open and accountable government. Staff strives to actively engage stakeholders in the process. the OLCC rulemaking takes into account many different viewpoints, considerations, and needs during our during the entire rulemaking process. And rulemaking really is this delicate balance for the need for staff to be able to regulate effectively and harmonizing the impacts from regulation on public and business. So really the most successful rulemaking happens through this effective compromise between our need to regulate and our desire not to be burdensome on the public and on business and on Oregonians. And then, as you guys well know, even if we try and account for everything in rule, what actually the stakeholders do, what the public does, may not always be what we planned for. So we make every attempt to minimize regulatory burden or oversight on businesses and the public. But stakeholders are very creative at bending, finding loopholes. And sometimes when you're sitting around those tables and drafting this language, what the actual experience is out in the field is not the same thing as what you came up with while you're in that boardroom. So just something to keep in mind. And that's it for presentation.
Did you do this presentation for us?
Yes.
It's excellent.
Oh, thank you.
It really, no, seriously, it's, you should consider using this as a educational tool. It's very, very good.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Chair.
Chair and fellow commissioners, we do this every year at the agency training so that employees know as well what we're doing in the background with our work and
Do you
rulemaking.
give this to your own staff?
Yes, annually.
You should consider giving this to different organizations that don't understand the legislative process and the rulemaking. This really is quite good.
Thank you.
I second what Chairman said. It's been being in this position. We've learned a lot. I mean, I think that coming in initially, there was initially you look at the fact that it does take a long time, and I think that folks in the industry that want something done, they may look at that as a burden. What I've really come to realize in my time here is what a benefit that is in a lot of ways, and how much accountability and thought goes into this process, all that does go into it. And while people we're in at least on the cannabis side, we're in a fast-moving and evolving industry, and rules take time. That can be a challenge, but I do think that the thoughtful engagement of the public and the process does require accountability. The other point I wanted to make was having this available to people, I think, is really helpful, just because, and I think there's also a testament to you guys in the fact that there has only really been one petition. That I know there's been a lot of folks that have reached out, whether it's to me, whether it's to you guys, that will come with suggestions. And I think that a testament to the fact that you guys have been nimble and gotten things done within the process is the fact that there has only been sort of one outlier petition that had to come from the public. I think that it shows that you guys have been taking the industry's concerns and thoughts into account and accommodating them well. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Commissioner Melitas. I think I just want to say, when you say them, I want to point out the rest of the staff that is also in the room and not in the room that provides us, that subject matter expertise that has allowed us to smooth out issues, provide guidance, and really work through rule processes to, mitigate those petitions and mitigate running head-on to any of the industries that we regulate. All staff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely, all staff.
I actually wrote the Administrative Procedures Act for Michigan.
Real page turner, right?
I'm sorry?
Real page turner, right?
Well, that's the point. There's so few people who truly understand the power of the Administrative Procedures Act. There's so few that any education they get, I used to laugh because I also sat on the Joint Administrative Rules Committee and the budget. And if you got a $20 million, a $50 million budget, the legislators thought that they controlled it. The minute they let it go, it's the agencies that control it. And the more education people can get as to what goes on after that money leaves the legislative committee, the better off everybody is.
Chair, I think yes, despite all the difficulties and bills and everything that's come to this commission in the past 5 years, I mean, we've had this process to rely upon to really move things through, maybe not perfectly. You know, we hear your comments on certain issues, but we've been able to rely on a process that we can say, this is how it is, and we're moving forward with it. It's really given us a handlebar to hold on to.
Will you send this to me, please, by email?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Excellent job. Okay. Chris, you're up. This is the first time you're up here, huh?
It's the second time, but
Second
the
time.
first time by myself. I usually come with Brian.
Well, Brian's not gonna help you.
He's
We're gonna
not.
be extra hot on it.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Chris Mayton. I am the Director of Distribution and Purchasing here, and I've been here for approximately 13 months. So we have never, or at least in my time here, have never given you a recap of the warehouse and what we've done. In the last 6 months, we've started doing quarterly business reviews. And I put together a presentation to share with the executive team every quarter and show them the production in the warehouse and where we're going when it comes to customer service and through our products and category management. So I thought it would be good to show you just a brief version. Normally it's about 50 slides, so I've cut it down to 15 just to give you just a recap and answer any questions you may have. So today I'm just going to do a couple highlights from the first quarter for you. I'll give you an overview of distribution, purchasing, a little bit of the future roadmap that we use in my division to put our sites forward, and a couple value proposition updates, and then I'll answer any questions. Just briefly, some recaps in the first quarter. January is really our recovery zone. So like any good athlete, after a game, they have to recover in a soaking tank. And our biggest volume is October, November, December. We call that OND. So January is really recovery for us. It's about getting our house back in order, cleaning up things. So it's really a time for us to get our senses back, and we welcome that every January. In February, I got to partner up with Brian and go to San Diego for the Vibe Conference. And the Vibe Conference is really about executive buyers for national chains, restaurant owners, and other beverage industry executives. And we get to touch base with the culture and innovation of what's coming in the marketplace. So we get, it's a good networking event for us. In March, we had a couple big things happen. We received an Ottawa T2 yard goat, which is the device we use to transport alcohol back and forth between Millport and Milwaukee. It had been on order for about 9 months. It finally arrived, and it can carry a heavier weight load. So now we're more efficient in our transportation up and down the street. We also completed our annual inventory in March, and we proposed a new delist discontinue policy, which I'll talk about in just a little bit, with all the suppliers. I pulled every distributor, supplier, broker in here in this room and shared with them some ideas we had, and then asked for their feedback to contribute toward it so we can create a little bit better of a process. And then we also brought on 2 new stores. So we hear about the expansion of retail every month or every quarter, and you talk about all the new stores that you're approving. All that new stores is more shipment, it's more cases, it's more work, and we don't necessarily get more employees. So we have to find a way to do a better job with that, and that's some of the things I'll share with you. So the first quarter, we finished the first quarter up 4% in shipping. So that's not related to revenue, but that's just the volume index that's improved. There's approximately 30,000 cases more than the first quarter of last year. Our service level was 91.94%, and how we measure that is really, I say it's out of stocks. So we were almost 8 or a little more than 8% out of stock. And in the first quarter of any year, that's pretty typical because you have to deal with transportation issues coming from the East Coast to the West Coast, and there's a lot of delays. So we do end up having multiple out of stocks that happen throughout the first quarter. That number typically goes up to 95% in the second quarter, but I'll tell you 91.9 is still too low for me, and me and my team are dead set against to get that number raised up for next first quarter. Average number of items, regular and listed products in the warehouse were 2,022 items. We have approximately 10 to 11,000 different SKUs throughout the state that we sell through special orders, limited in trial, but just in the warehouse for regular and limited items, it's a little over 2,000. Our average inventory turn is 0.6, so just under once every 2 months we'll flip the entire inventory. And I'll talk about it in a minute, but we have just under 500,000 cases of inventory in the warehouse. Our average monthly case in the first quarter ship was just over 260,000. This gives a glimpse, and I'm pretty excited about one of the TBDs, so I thought I'd share it with you. You can look at the volume by quarter that's been leaving the warehouse. Started in 16 in the first quarter, it was 695,000. This first quarter, we did just over 790,000. So considerable improvement or increases in volume, and a lot of that has to do with population growth in the state and the expansion of stores. But if you scroll your eyes down to Q4, 900, 922, 989, I'm here to tell you that in the fourth quarter of this year, we'll ship over 1 million cases. And that'll be the first time that this agency has ever done that. So it's gonna be a big year for us. I wanted to give you a glimpse at the first quarter by week. So you can look at the index. The bottom number, like week 1 was 45,000 cases. Week 13 was 66,000 cases. You can look at the impacts by holidays. I have them in graphics above each week. So you can see New Year's Day, MLK Day. You can see the Super Bowl, Valentine's Day, and what kind of impact it makes. Remember, when the holiday comes, usually we're shipping the week before to get it in the store so that it will be there for the consumer, but that's our week volume. And you can see we start to ramp up from day one. So you turn the year of Christmas and the volume drops, and then we just start to ramp and build up. And then the percentage is just showing the share by week for the first quarter. This is a glimpse at the last 2 years, so 17 and 18, really just a summary chart of receiving versus shipping. And it's to show how well we do with procurement of products coming in. We don't want to take in more than we can house, and we certainly don't want to take in more than we sell. So we're just trying to keep that equalized. You'll see there's a couple ramp ups that happen in the third quarter. Usually that's because we're receiving an abundance of product before we go into OND, which is our biggest time of the year. So we stock up in the third quarter per se, and then we relinquish throughout the rest of the year. I put 2 slides of KPIs, and I use tons of them. In warehouse, it's all about being efficiencies, but I thought I would walk you through these from left to right and then top to bottom after that. But really, the inventory wholesale in the warehouse, we house about $47 million worth of inventory every day of the first quarter, and that's a lot of money, 47 million. In the first quarter of last year, it was 45 million. So basically, we're $2 million more, which is the 2.9% increase. That's why the arrow goes back to that first quarter. But I also wanted to see you to see how the inventory changes throughout the year, seasonality, right? In the fourth quarter, which is our biggest revenue producing years, we carry $50 million of inventory. So we bulk up. Same goes with the stores, inventory retail value. This is what we're responsible for on the street because the stores are on bailment. So basically we're transferring the inventory to the store when they receive it. We have 47 million in our house. We have just under 70 million in all the stores across the state. So that's what I tell my supervisor, that's our at risk. That's what we're at risk for. Shipping error rates, this is a number I'm not proud of, but I shared it at the agent training, and I shared it with the executive team, and I want to explain to you how I come up with it. But if you looked at our case error rate by the number of cases that go out the door, and we ship approximately 13,000 cases every day, we have very few. It's like 0.002 is the percentage of errors. But when I think about it from a customer's eyes and how they look at it, they get an order a week. That's 52 times they see us. Some stores only get an order every other week. They only see us 26 times. So I asked my team to tell me how many times a store that gets a shipment gets an order that has an error in it. And I put that number together, and those are the numbers you see up there. 4.9%.
We eat that.
That's right. That's human error that we make leaving the warehouse. And we were at 5% roughly for last year. And then in the fourth quarter of last year, we dropped it to 3.6%. In the first quarter of this year, we got it down to 2.8%. So we're getting better. We're not where we need to be because I'm a Lean Six Sigma guy. I like to have my belt and show it well. We need to be 0.09 or lower, and I think we'll find a way there. It's just going to take a little time. Our handled cost per case, and this is just generic, it's number of cases versus amount of labor spent. So if you just, it just gives me a good comparison to know if my management team is controlling overtime and hours worked with employees. So we were at $1.40 a case touched last year. We're at $1.39 this year. So we're a penny less, and we shipped 30,000 more cases. So that's good news for us. We did a better job with what we had, and we do that through coaching and through training, through elevating the employees that we have by cross-training them and allowing them to do different jobs, and that elevates their status within the agency. On the second page, so just some more details, our average service level, I talked about that already. We were down 2.62 in the first quarter. We're already back up to 94% right now, but we own that, we have to wear it. Our average daily inventory, that's the cases I talked about early, just under 420,000 cases in the first quarter we carry every day. And I talked about the 3.2% for cases shipped. And then our monthly turns, that's where we get a little bit better with category management in the warehouse. I have an inventory scheduler. He manages the inventory. And just to give you a brief backdrop, our inventory is vendor managed, so I don't go out and place orders for all those cases. The vendor or the supplier, they look at our inventory on a daily basis, and then they project what we need, and then they send it to us. Our job is to review those recaps, what they send us, and then if they're sending us too much, slow them down. If they're not sending us enough, we ask for more. So we want to get that turns moving faster, more towards a just-in-time inventory system, so that we're not keeping product on the floor for too long. One of these last slides is category review. This is really, you guys hear from Nikki every quarter. She comes up and gives you a presentation on what we approve. I thought it would be pertinent to share a little bit more about what she does and her team does. This is what we sell by category. And if you just look at the bottom of the slide there where it's got our top 5 performing products by volume, Tito's by far is our number 1 brand in growth, up 37% year over year. And it just continues. They're on a tear. And that's with volume of almost a million cases. That's just significant. Pendleton is up 232,000 cases, or 8.5%. Buffalo Trace up 214. Jameson up 186, and then the Blanco is up 177. So just big numbers. I don't want to read the graphic chart to you, but you can take a time and look at it. I think this next page is the one I like the most. If you look at our category share by shelf dollars, if you look at vodka, if you just look at how much people they buy 26% of our sales come from vodka sales. And vodka sales were up 6.5%. If any retail business is going to say yeehaw or yippee-ki-yay, they're jumping all over that. That's huge growth. Domestic whiskeys at 19% of our share was up 7.7%. And then Canadian whiskey up 4.5 over a 12.5 market share. So, and then tequila, it keeps on trucking, and it changes by season, but it's 10% of our share, and it was up 11.6%. So those 4 categories make up 70% of our overall volume. And we have, if you go back to the previous slide, you see all the categories at the top of the page. These 4 make up 70% of our revenue. So they're highly important to our growth. Thinking about what's next, this is the path in the warehouse. I talked about the delisting and discontinuation. For as many new products that are coming into the market today with craft beer, craft wine, well, it's moved over to craft distilled spirits. We have a lot of new SKUs coming in, roughly between 20 to 150 any month. It just really depends on who's knocking on the door that day. And we want to be able to say yes more to suppliers, to bring in the new products, to try them, to generate new shelf dollar sales. But to do that, we have to remove some of the things that aren't selling. And so we've been working really hard in partnership with suppliers to create a SKU proliferation and optimization plan that will allow us to eliminate products that don't produce revenue for the state or for the supplier. And we're really, really close to that. We launched that in March. We took feedback through April 15th. We compiled that feedback, and I'm within 2 weeks of presenting it to the executive team so that they can put the final okay on it, and then we'll implement it. We're also working on creating a supplier guide because we get a lot of phone calls from distilleries and manufacturers who don't understand how to get a product listed. So we're creating a supplier guide to give to anyone who calls and asks so they know what the rules are and they're not going to be in violation when there's a problem. So we can clearly explain it to them. And then we have to take the next step, which has been a bit of a sore, but we do have to look at Oregon products. We have an abundance of SKUs, and we do have a sales issue with some of them. So we have to be creative because we certainly don't want to hurt the distilleries at all, but we want to make sure that we make product available to customers who want them, but we have to do what makes sense to keep it on the shelf in the warehouse. And then finally, it's revitalizing the website for our products. Right now, if you go on Oregon Liquor Search and you try to look up a product, you're about a 50-50 shot of getting a good picture. And we want to make sure that that picture shows, it's represented what it is for consumers so they know what they're looking at. And then for my department, lastly, I guess in summary, it's really 4 big opportunities for us. One is just change management. And like I said, I've been here about 13 months, so it's just making sure me and my team are keeping pace with the rapidly customer changing requirements and expectations that are in the state. Number 2, it's implementing a management dashboard to track. I'm a numbers guy, and I don't have a dashboard, and I think we have a little bit of a challenge with technology, and I know we're working on it. So I'm trying to be soft with that statement, Chair. Communication for sure is a big part. We have to make sure that interagency communication is improved. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it can always be better. And so I make that a constant effort of mine to improve that within the agency. And then also, I work in the warehouse, but it doesn't mean I can't hit the street. So I like to tour the state with retail. And I've been on many trips with Mr. Fleming and his team to visit stores in Central Oregon and Eastern Oregon and Portland. I still have to get to Southern Oregon. So I want to get out and listen to what the agents want, and I take their feedback as well. And the suppliers and the customers and the agency. So I really have 4 counterbalances I'm trying to measure at all time to keep people happy. And then the last but not least, I don't know if it's been talked about before here, but every time I say to my warehouse, I get a lot of people perking up. It's just about becoming more sustainable in the warehouse. And my previous life was with some bigger global companies. So coming here, I'm trying to bring some of that influence here and how we can do things as simple as, I think one of the complaints I received from the store when I first started was peanuts. We were putting peanuts in packaging, the styrofoam peanuts, and the agent was telling me what a mess it was all over their floor, not to mention it cost them valuable garbage can space. And so how could I get rid of that? So I did. I removed it, and we went with recycled paper. And now the paper comes in that we buy is less expensive, and it's recyclable, so when it goes out, they don't have to spend for it. So it's just about coming up with creative ways to be more sustainable as an agency, to improve our efficiencies and lower our carbon footprint on the state. So questions? I know I went pretty fast and just trying to be conservative of your time, but we do this over a couple hours every quarter. There's a lot more data behind it that I didn't share. They're mostly in the weeds stuff, but I wanted to give you a big view. But before I say anything or ask for your questions, I just want to give a shout out to my team. I have 60 warehouse workers that work 2 shifts from 6 in the morning to 11 o'clock at night. I have a purchasing team of 3 and a support staff of 2. So, and with that, they ship every day 13,000 cases out the door and do it without complaint or much complaint. And they do it without air conditioning. And in the hot summer months that are coming, we do have heat, so it's warehouse work. But nothing would get done without what they do, and none of it's me. I'm just the keeper of the reports and present, so that they're the ones that do it. And I thank you for the opportunity, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Anybody?
No questions.
Thank you.
I have one comment. Thank you for the tour.
Oh, yeah,
I really
absolutely.
appreciated that greatly.
Will you go back to slide 13, please? Thank you. I don't think anybody here knows this, but I own the third-party fulfillment company. It was called 3PF. It was out outside of Cincinnati. We have 400 plus employees, and it's a tough business, and you gotta be very smart in how you're operating it. So, your 2019 opportunities, it's fine, but what I'm bringing up for the sake of this commission is that the most important issue that you have, that Steve has, that Will has, and this whole agency has, is how are we going to plan the next 5 years for third-party fulfillment? In other words, what are we gonna do with the warehouse? How are we going to operate it? Do we need to consolidate what we're doing? And these are incredibly important questions. And these are questions that, you know, in that slide, it's gonna come back to us to make the final decision. And the input that you guys give us is incredibly important. You cannot survive unless you start planning today for what's gonna happen 5 years from today. And quite frankly, what we need to do right now, because you, rightfully so, you never mentioned it in here, but the big issue is what are we gonna do for the next 5 years? Correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And we need to start having a discussion today about what we're gonna do with it. Tomorrow's too late. It's gonna be depending upon what we do, it's either gonna be a 2-year decision or a 4-year decision. Either way, there's going to be tremendous advantages in the long run, but unbelievable disruption in between, and you have to plan for that.
I would tell you, Chair, thank you. We're already doing that.
Right.
We're meeting multiple times. I've met already with groups of architects and future strategists with Salem, DAS, and we're talking about whether we stay as a centralized warehouse or decentralizing and putting up more locations. We're in the midst of that right now, trying to work on a 3 and a 5 and a 10-year
Well,
plan.
what I know that. What I'm saying, and I have to say it out loud because this is where we have a chance to talk about it. I'm always back to that, aren't I? Well, it's true. So here's my point, and I wanna make this very clear. We have some very bright people on this commission. I think we've proved that over the short period of time. We're very dedicated. You have some tough decisions to make, and we wanna be involved in them. Because the first tough decision you're gonna make in the near future is whether you're gonna stay or whether you're gonna go. And that eventually is gonna come back to us anyway. I wanna have some input into that. You've got some good experience out here, and I don't want, you guys, we're gonna listen to you, but include us in on it. And Steve, I think we should start planning towards at least getting this full commission involved and keeping us up to date about your thinking, then asking us, certainly in advance, on our input into it so that we're all on the same page. This is no criticism, this is just an observation that says, you're coming back to us, we're gonna have some definitive ideas too, but your input into us is incredibly important. And this is the time to do it. So, this presentation was great, we trust you 100%, trust us to work with you on it in the future. Any other comments?
I would just second that as well. I think, you know, the logistics and facilities, Portland is a notoriously challenging industrial market. There's only so many opportunities that exist, and you guys have done a great job with the facilities that you've got. And it's, and so, yeah, any assistance that any of us can be, I think, Chairman Rosenbaum, coming from the board, I've worked in industrial real estate. I understand the constraints that you guys are under, and how forward-thinking you really have to be to look at finding a facility that would be optimized for the needs and distribution logistics agnostic, so as much as assistance as we can provide or I can provide, please let us know.
I look forward to your support.
Yeah, we just don't want to be a rubber stamp. We want to be involved in this.
Good.
Commissioner Curran, do you have something you want to say?
I was just
You
gonna
look
ask
like
if
you
you
were
could
gonna say
send,
something.
send the report to us, if you could,
Oh, sure.
copy of this, to our emails.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, on the whole issue of, what we do at the warehouse and the process and the evaluation that need to be made, Chris is exactly right. We have a state process with DAS. We're currently, in this first evaluation that we shared with the commission really did speed up our timeline. It gave us a good indication that maybe there was opportunities to take advantage of now. We are actually actively now looking at how we do the analysis for real estate within probably the Portland metropolitan area and south of here towards Salem. Chris is looking at operations, I think, in terms of sort of the secondary structure of a warehouse, whether that makes sense. But for Hugh, we're very limited on this space here. We have two operations. We have an inefficiency in moving from the additional warehouse down. So this is coming on us. I did report to the Legislative Ways and Means Committee. We talked about this acceleration. They are now expecting, and we'll have some direction of us to come back to them with our, not findings, but our work around this issue. This is a big real estate transaction issue. It's a huge human resource issue. And so it's fast and furious, and we got a lot of work to do in the next year.
We're actively adding locations to the warehouse through just space management, going a little more vertical, which we can't go.
You're answering
but
your own question.
You can only do it for so long. So,
And that's my very point. You're answering your own question. There has to be some decisions going to be made, because then we have to implement them all the way across the board. And the quicker we do it, the better off we're going to be.
correct.
You can tell my management style, can't you?
I got to witness firsthand the truck rodeo that goes on outside, the dock, so
Yes,
thanks for
indeed.
the tour again.
You're welcome. Anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I thought
Chris called that a truck ballet.
And I guess before Renee's coming up, to thank Chris and Brian for inviting us to the agent training last month. That was really, that was my first time there. It was great to see everybody and see the presentations. And I hope to be back next year for what sounds like the better day is the first day, so. Or should I say the first night?
As long as you don't have to get up and talk about agents' commissions, you're in good shape.
It was a great event, and I'll tell you, after I heard the presentation on the Clear Creek brandy, the pear brandy, I went and bought some for Mother's Day, and we served pear Collinses for Mother's Day brunch because of the presentation. It just rises to the level of, it brings everything to your attention, and you think of things. So I think it's great for the agents. I think it's great for them to be able to educate people who are in the market, and so great job.
You're on.
Okay, Chair Rosenbaum, members of the commission, for the record, Renee Niedermeyer, Director of Government Relations. Well, the legislature is in a fast-paced mode, or speeding up mode right now. Bills and amendments are quickly moving through the chambers because the second chamber deadline is next Friday, which means that the bills have to be scheduled for work sessions, or they're dead, or moved to Ways and Means or Rules. And then, but the bills that aren't scheduled for work sessions won't make it through the process. So a lot of work is happening there. There's just about 5.5 weeks left in the session for the target sine die date. So we should expect to see a lot of movement. Now that we have the May forecast, we should expect to see more budgets coming out of committees and bills that maybe have been held on for a while to start moving in committees as well. As I've mentioned before, a lot of the key bills that impact our agency are in Ways and Means, and I just wanted to talk about a couple of them. Senate Bill 111, that's the wine omnibus bill. We've talked about that before. It makes changes to the tonnage tax statutes. It allows OLCC to enter into reciprocal agreements with other states on wine regulation and sanctions, wine labeling and packaging. And then it also gives us a tremendous amount of rulemaking authority on wine content, labeling, and enforcement. And so we should be expecting to see that bill come out of committee. There's still some conversations going on, but I think they're doing a good job of mitigating some of the issues. Senate Bill 248, which doubles the annual alcohol license fee, raises about $9.2 million. We propose that to help fund some of the things that are in our budget, including IT, to help our alcohol side of our agency. Has made it through the our subcommittee in Ways and Means. It went with a due pass recommendation to the full committee. It's going for a vote tomorrow. So we'll see what happens with that. Senate Bill 108, which is the one, it addresses compensation for distillery tasting rooms and liquor agents. That one is in the committee. There's no general agreement there, but there's still a lot of one of the things I wanted to say is our main budget bill actually separates out distillery agent compensation, distillery tasting room compensation from liquor agent compensation. So that way legislators can have individual discussions about what they want to do around the amount that they allocate to compensation. So really the main decisions are going around three choices. One, allocate more money to either or both groups, to do a budget note for an interim study, or do the status quo, or some combination of those three. So that's the framing of the discussions that are happening. We also have House Bill 3386, which creates a license for delivery of alcohol to homes, including distilled spirits. That is in Ways and Means. It's likely to come out and it hasn't been assigned to a subcommittee yet. I just talked with Representative Doherty yesterday, and they believe that it is going to go to a subcommittee for a hearing. Senate Bill 585 directs OLCC to establish a responsible cannabis retailer program similar to the one that we have in alcohol. That is also in committee. There hasn't been any movement yet, but again, the Ways and Means committees have been focusing on hearing agency budgets and are just now starting on the policy bills. We have one other bill that we've been following. It's been referred to rules. That has been referred to rules. Is Senate Bill 591. It's wine unlawful trade practices, so it kind of follows some of the other wine bills that we'll be looking at. There's no recent action on that. And then we have bills that are kind of working through the committees and working through the normal process. We have 3 wine bills, Senate Bill 829, Senate Bill 830, and Senate Bill 831. And those are on labeling, grape varietals, and content standards. But basically what it does is it gives us rulemaking authority. It clarifies rulemaking authority. One of those bills has passed out of committee with a due pass recommendation in the second chamber. The other 2 are up for a work session next week. So I expect they'll be moving. Senate Bill 218, we talked about that a little earlier today. That's the one that allows the commission to do a moratorium on producer licenses. That is scheduled for a work session next Monday. So that'll be in committee. The Senate Bill 582, which allows the governor to enter into an agreement with another state for purposes of cross-jurisdictional coordination and enforcement of marijuana laws, passed the Senate and is now on its way to the House floor for a vote. And Senate Bill 2467 requires registration and a fee for a redemption center. That's the one where we want to get some help for Becky, our one bottle bill person. And that was for our new commissioner. That was actually, there's a $3,000 registration fee that was suggested by the folks who say, please charge us so we can get Becky some help. So that's how that works. Senate Bill 2098, I've talked about that before. It's a marijuana policy and technical fix bill. It's passed the House. A work session was held last Tuesday, and it's been sent to the Senate floor with a due pass recommendation. It has some additional amendments in it, but I just wanted to touch a couple things that are in that bill, and then when I come back next time, we can maybe talk a little more about the specifics of the entire bill. What it does is it establishes a testing advisory committee to advise us on potency testing, as ODA and Oregon Health Authority on potency testing. It allows us to conduct a pilot program to improve access to medical card holders. It includes laboratory licenses in the statutes, areas of statutes where they've been admitted. For example, the licensee must be 21 years or older, or we may restrict or suspend a laboratory license if they're a bad actor in some ways. It allows delivery of marijuana items to OMMP card holders who are over 18, and before in law it was over 21. And it allows for suspension of a license if a licensee is missing and it's been taken over by a non-authorized person. It clarifies that that we can use Nexus cards or Sentry cards as valid forms of ID for sales of marijuana. It allows us to revoke a retailer's license for non-payment of taxes. There's quite a system that has to go into place to get to that place, but it allows for suspension. Pertinent to a discussion earlier, this commission meeting, it raises the upper limit of fines that can be assessed from $5,000 to $10,000, and then make some technical fixes. To clean up the statutes and clean up the law. So it's kind of a hodgepodge of issues, but it takes care of a lot of issues and things that we needed to get done this session. And the only other thing I want to say is we did, since our last meeting, we did go before the Ways and Means Subcommittee, and Chair Rosenbaum was part of that. Or actually was part of the next one, I'm sorry. But we went before the Ways and Means Subcommittee on Phase 2 presentation, which were items our needs that we see in the future, and items that were actually outside of the governor's recommended budget. Many times we had new information, or and we were invited to come and talk about what's facing our agency and our budget needs there. And then Chair Rosenbaum joined us and helped us on our presentation on our IT modernization project, the distilled spirit supply chain, and the alcohol and marijuana licensing. And at the Joint Committee on Information Management and Technology, they made a recommendation for our subcommittee to approve our proposals given their review. So, anything, basically, we've got just a few more weeks left, and people are working hard to get this baby born.
No, thank you. Any questions? I'm just curious, it's not a quiz or anything, but members of the audience, how many people know that a gross receipts tax passed the House and Senate and waiting to be signed by the governor in this state? How many? Just raise your hand if you know it. It's not a quiz. Okay. Thank you. I'm just curious.
Any other questions?
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Steve, you're up.
Yeah, well, just a few things. I think we've covered the bulk of everything that I would otherwise report to you, but I do think there are a few areas of concern or of commission work that we're going to have to get done, and I think this ties in with the chairman and commission's desire to get around the state, to engage the communities we're regulating, particularly around marijuana. But I also think we have a big need to do that for the wine industry and the vineyards and grape growers of Oregon. Legislature obviously is having a big debate over the industry, on labeling, on content standards for wine and our higher standards. And I think that's one. I recently appeared 2 days ago at McMinnville at a town hall organized by the Oregon Willamette Valley Wine Association, but it was a discussion session about all of these issues affecting the wine industry, and there was vineyards there was Southern Oregon represented, and it was a great opportunity for me to be able to express for the commission our desire to work with them to support the industry in looking at the regulations. Whether legislation passes or not, those issues are coming towards the commission, and that it's our desire to take actions to strengthen the industry and represent it across the board. I think we're gonna have a lot of work to do, not unlike some of the early work we did with the marijuana community, where we really engaged a lot of those folks in the processes of considering regulations and then making rules, and that's a big deal. The other big deal, obviously, is once if 218 passes and the legislature adjourns, we need to get some input on that. Probably emergency rules we will be putting in place following that action. Probably. It's your discretion on what happens after that. But I think that follows with our need to engage with the marijuana industry and cannabis industry on both 218 and then the export legislation that is passed. That has us, the commission, with a role to make some recommendations on exports in the future. I think that's very much aligned with Chairman Rosenbaum. I think expressed a direct desire that we have that opportunity. So we need to think about how we get around the state and talk to folks. One of the things we're doing after this meeting is trying to plan what that looks like, what those engagements look like. I do think that probably it'll be a recommendation of staff to you that early on, and as early as we can possibly make it work, it may need to be in July, just so it's post-session, that we should consider getting a commission meeting in the southern part of the state, Southern Oregon.
Geared specifically to?
Well, I think around these two sets of issues, we have a lot of the marijuana community and interest in industry represented in there, a lot of the wine industry that has some angst and wants to be included in the discussions that will be had following the session on winery. I think it's a great opportunity for us to.
I don't want to.
Yeah.
We'll talk about
Yes.
this, but I don't want to. I think each one deserves their own specific attention.
Sure. Yes.
I don't want to mix them because I think we're doing them a disservice and we're doing ourselves a disservice.
And I think that's absolutely right. So if we're down there, we may do two things formally. We may split them. We may do it listening town hall environment thing, not a formal commission meeting, but where people can express their views. We've done that earlier, but I think it's really important for us to at least consider how we get their input and what's the best way to do it. And I think that would be a step we'd recommend to the commission as a commission meeting down in Southern Oregon.
Good.
To be followed up by what the other outreach we need to do to the rest of the state, that staff needs to do, that commissioners can engage in, and we'll work with you in your regions to enable so that people really, I think, get the sense that we are open, not only open for business, we're open for their ideas about how we structure our business for them in the future.
Makes sense.
Otherwise, I will not be at NAPCA, so please carry out all of our important economic duties there.
We will. The former chairman will be there, which I'm pleased about.
Yes.
Phil.
Phil.
Yeah. Okay, any last thought process before we comb our hair and get our pictures taken?
Well, it is May, and graduation, proms. I think one of the positions we have at this commission is to definitely make sure we support our graduates and our kids on the newly licensed as an insurance agent. I'm at this week a bunch of kids getting their license, and I'm making more money. But at the end of the day, they're on the roads, and just being cognizant of the fact that we're here to make sure that our deliverables are used in a responsible way. And I'm excited about the end of this graduation period and kids going off to college and being responsible.
Commissioner Palcic, it's a pleasure having you. We look forward